Welcome to Nuggets with Sauce, the podcast dishing up golden nuggets of wisdom and insight you can really sink your teeth into. I'm your host, Michelle Arntz. My guests and I serve up a saucy take on common business challenges here that feeds your hunger for knowledge and thought leadership. So let's dig in. Hey, those of you who have really short memories, and maybe some of you who don't really have short memories, welcome to this edition of Nuggets with Sauce. I am your host, Michelle Arntz, and I'm talking about memory for a couple of reasons today. And no, I won't try to sing the song from Cats because I sound like a screeching cat when I try to sing. But here I am, loving my guest who's here with me on this episode. Welcome back, Chason Forehand. Welcome back to Nuggets.
Thank you.
So happy to have you here now. Chason, check out our conversation. He was my second guest ever. So go back to season 1, episode 3, where Chason and I had a grand old time having a really in-depth chew on it conversation around layoffs and the ridiculousness of layoffs. And so Chason, we are shortly going to dig into, we're going to thread the needle on why is Michelle talking about memories and short memories in particular. But I always like to introduce my guests, as you know, without using job titles or things that show up on a business card. So Chason, could you please remind our audience, what's your magic mojo in this world? What are you getting out of bed every day and making the world a better place with?
I am getting out of bed to correct the 44% of all American workers that make below a living wage. That's what gets me out of bed.
44% below living wage. Ridiculous. That is a wonderful thing to get out of bed every day and fight that fight. I'm with you on that. I'm part of that that pressure point too. What is your recommended read, watch, or listen these days?
I have to go. There's two that I want to shout out real quick.
Yeah.
Everyday Inspiration for Change. That is Manola Jack. And just a fantastic book that you want to read. My favorite chapter is why or how the moon inspires her and in the change environment. And then Habits for Happiness by Janet Mohapi Banks. So I am thrilled to recommend those two books. Those two people are we're going to be giving away those books in our Feed for Good event that's coming up on Friday. So
awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, again, I always love to encourage people, keep learning, keep growing. This is all part of the journey. We're
Absolutely.
leaders, we're connected with leaders, our audience is full of leaders. And, there's nothing quite like leading the charge by feeding your brain great knowledge, great inspiration. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So let's dig into our delicious golden nuggets of conversation here. And I know saucy sassiness between us. You're a reasonably mellow guy, but you've got a spicy kick going on in the background there that I think is always fun. Are we is that how we're feeling today, Chason?
I would say that's how we're feeling. I could certainly jump up on my soapbox and let out some angst. So yes.
Please do. I mean, again, we're having these conversations to really open the minds, eyes, ears, thoughts of our thought leaders. And I know that what we're going to talk about today is really weird and interesting to me. I loved when you said, "Hey, let's talk about this, Michelle." And so let me just close the loop on this whole. Those of you who've got short memories, or if you remember anything at all. Wow, it was only a couple years ago, in the midst of something absolute crazy crank, that everybody all of a sudden got really into DEI. So let me just tee that up, and Chason, pick up from here and dunk that nugget and tell us what you're seeing this in your space. Let's remind everybody what DEI is and why was it such a thing, at least during pandemic.
Yeah, I will take this even further. It started before the pandemic with George Floyd and all the the world started to be on fire. And There were a
Dumpster.
lot of conversations about things that we were lacking as far as leadership and beyond, just in society. And really starting 2019, it's been going on forever, but for some reason, with with not just political but world events happening, 2019 just started this whole thing. Then the pandemic, everyone being, some people being stranded in other countries, some people being, locked in their homes, millions of people losing their lives.
Yeah.
The world was on fire.
Yeah.
And leaders got a really strong dose of, wow, we've got to not only change, but we've got to learn a different style of leadership. People are going to be doing things differently. What do we do to stay afloat?
Yeah.
And
Good times,
I
right?
mean, yeah, it was just,
It all comes
like I
down.
said, the world's on fire
Yeah. Yeah. And we
for
got it.
everybody.
We either got to get the marshmallows out or we got to find a way to put her out. Take your pick. Yeah.
Everybody decided that they're going to start creating diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, that they're really going to, they're going to go through the whole thing, DEIAB. Like we're gonna make it accessible. We're gonna care for everybody. How do we show up for all these people, and how do we do the work?
Yeah. It's a
Honestly,
crisis.
it was the first time in my life that
Yeah.
I actually turned down a client. Very first time since 2012 that I said no to a client because I could tell that I could use the money like everybody else. I lost clients. People shuddered.
Yeah.
People were like, Chason, I'm really sorry. I mean, what are we gonna do?
I know.
I'm going to mom and pop, dry cleaners and restaurants and all of these places that no longer had business. And a lot of them didn't survive. They just shut down during this time period.
I mean, it was a crisis, a real, true crisis. Yeah.
So I had a company reach out to me and say, we want to create a DEIAB program. We want to create diversity, equity, inclusion. We want to do the work. We want to do all these things. It was all lip service. And it was very clear that they wanted a one and done, create some policies and procedures. We'll make some things happen, and we'll give you a check. You go your way, we'll go our way. And I'm like, I'm not putting my name on that.
No.
You could find, I'm sure you can find somebody, because there's a lot of people hurting for business. So I'm sure that there's some big SaaS HR company that's like, oh yeah, come on, we'll do this for you.
We'll take your money.
Yeah, not
it's
me.
a check the box kind of a thing at that point, isn't it? It's just like we want to look like, sound like we're doing something, and we want to say that we care. And so they were coming across like this was going to be the quick, easy way to look like they were doing something heroic, but you could tell there was really nothing behind it except some box checking, put out a memo kind of stuff, not real DEI.
We're not even scratching. DEI
So
work.
you said no.
Look, I mean, my wife was a little shocked, but I mean, it just is. It was the right thing to do.
Well, dare I say, Chason, that's a really important nugget right there, which isn't entirely tied to some degree to what we're talking about, but I think that's such a super important lesson right there is, if it's not aligned with you and who you are, and, those of us in this business space are like, my name is attached to this business. Do I feel good about this at the end of the day? Because if it doesn't jive for me and it doesn't align with my values, at what point I've said no to stuff too, because I'm just sitting there anyway. So I just want to say, I think that is a golden nugget side dish option with an extra little bit of sauce on the side in our conversation. But I wanted to point that out because that's powerful. Because I think there was a lot of accusation around that, when DEI really kind of became a thing in this crisis environment with everything on fire, like you're talking about. Oh, the memories, right? And then it's like, but how much of that rang hollow for the people who were involved in it, or frankly got mandated into it, and you know, could sit there and go, well, I know the companies say they're doing this, but like really, it like what it felt like and what it was, there's a disconnect there, wouldn't you say, in a lot of cases?
Well, and it's showing up in spades right now because here we are in the fourth quarter. We're about to go into October, so the fourth quarter of 2024, and we've seen organizations like SHRM removing equity from their language. We've seen giant organizations say they're doing away with their DEI programs and DEI departments, and they're laying off people. And, you know, don't get me started on all the layoff stuff. We
Oh,
talked about that last
I
season, but
know. Well, that never seems
oh,
to go away either, does it? That always, you know,
I
hey,
mean,
it's
that
a
just gets
holiday.
me fired up right
I
there.
know.
That alone, like,
Jason, we know this
oh,
holiday's coming up. I mean, that's what everybody gives
yeah.
to get rid of people, you know, merry holidays.
Yeah, the end
But
of the year, beginning of it's
yeah.
just to me it's
So
unfathomable, but
So
yeah.
what do you figure? So you're right. Like it's starting to be like, well, you know, DEI, we sort of did that. We checked a box, we did whatever. It was this thing, and now it's not really a thing. And so every, you know, left, right, and center, it's being dropped, scaled back, which of course, as you mentioned, makes a ripple effect of all kinds of crazy crank.
Yeah.
What's going on? Why, like, I guess my question's kind of twofold, and let's start with what's your sense of why are they walking away from something that they were so big on embracing a couple of years ago? And then I'll try to remember to follow that up because I will go in a bunch of directions. But and what are the consequences? So why is anybody stopping this? And what's the price that's being paid when, you know, leaders of the business world are like, nah, shove that one aside. Let's move on to the next flavor of the month. So
Well, we're seeing
why?
we can kind of work backwards. We're seeing the results
Mhm.
r-
Okay.
in the job market.
Yeah.
We're seeing the results in the number of companies that are going to have layoffs. We're seeing the result in how many people are burned out,
Yeah.
the increase of suicides, the increase of people saying that they are mentally unwell and
Sick
they feel
days.
unappreciated and, stressed and burnout, and
Mhm.
people are fried.
People are fried. Yeah.
And
And
it's,
that hits performance, that hits business outcomes. That's a productivity thing. Hey, I'm too sick and or sick and tired to come into work today. Even if I'm there, I'm not really, you know, body's in the building, but not really into it. Your customers, I think, are going to be feeling that. Hi, welcome to blah, blah. How are you doing today?
yeah, yeah,
Or if they
it,
have to be super chipper on the opposite end, then they collapse at night and, you know, burn out.
yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. It's going to impact you,
Yeah.
your family, your friends, your neighborhood, your community. There's that rippling effect.
Yeah.
That's why we talk about so much that how important it is that we have diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, belonging,
Yeah.
that we are moving beyond being allies and being
Yeah.
accomplices,
So
as
how
Aaron
is it?
Johnson says. I mean, we
Yeah.
we we need to do a better job
Yeah.
of pouring into people, caring about them on their needs, and magically, when we start to do that,
Yeah.
and we start to realize the importance of having DEI programs in place, and that work is a daily
Mhm.
effort, then we are going to see massive results in P&Ls.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just
So help
it's
us out here a little bit, you know, in case anybody's still kind of going, well, you know, what's the case for this? So can we talk about a couple examples of, you know, because I always talk about like there's symptoms, right? Like what's really going on, you know? So like the burn, like how, let's talk about like these symptoms or these issues that you shared. Like, you know, there's the burnout, there's the health issues, the mental health issues. I don't feel safe. I'm not as productive. I'm, you know, there's all this impact, ripple effect going on you know, through your, you know, through the employee pool and at all levels, by the way. It's not, you know, necessarily like just because you got a certain title or whatever that you're off the hook. There's a lot of people stressed in a lot of ways. So how was it that DEI was reducing those? Like now those are flaring up again because we're walking away from the DEI stuff. Help us understand, Chason, how DEI was lowering the temperature on those issues. What was it about DEI that was making me, how was it making me feel safer, better, less burnt out?
Well, I think even the companies that were just checking boxes, at least there's something being done. So you're moving,
Mm,
you're you're not doing it right, and
right,
it's messy, and you could potentially cause further problems,
right.
but there's some activity
Mhm.
that's happening
Yeah,
that's at least band-aiding what's going on.
right.
So you see the companies that were doing that box checking are now imploding with,
Right.
okay, we've got layoffs. We're going to get rid of our entire department here. We're going to revamp HR. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. We're going to cut costs. And we talked about this off camera, but it reminds me of in education
Mm,
how schools start to get rid of arts for kids.
right.
Let's get rid of the choral program. Let's get rid of the arts programs. Let's get rid of drama. Why should our kids be well-rounded? Why should we teach them
Yeah,
emotional intelligence and empathy and show them how art creates the
right,
creative aspect of
right,
all of those things I mentioned in
right.
those programs,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
that creates well-rounded human beings.
yeah, yeah.
It's the same principle.
Yeah, I
We're
think
going
it's,
to take out all the other things
yeah,
so that we can pay CEOs and all that, the same amount of, it's still that crazy triangle of, we've got this one percenters up top here,
yeah,
and all they care about is what is our profit and how much money can we make. But literally, if that really is the only thing that you cared about, force yourself to do the things that
yeah,
people a lot smarter than this guy have already written about in Harvard and Fortune
yeah,
and Forbes and everywhere else.
yeah,
Pour into your people, take care of them, actually put things in place that give them the tools they need to make them psychologically safe
yeah,
and have an environment where they can thrive. And you will have those things you want.
right.
Your bottom line will thrive.
Right. Well, you're
And,
floating a lot more boats that way, right? So to speak, like the tide that lifts all boats.
yeah,
I love your analogy. Actually, I really, really love your tie in there on, like, if we were looking at this from the perspective of schools, and so if we cut certain programming because we're, everything's about whatever, so STEM or whatever. Not that STEM isn't important. I mean, science, technology, math, all that stuff. It's great. Um, but I think that's a great analogy for a couple things that in my mind, flies in the business world too around DEI. Because it's like, for myself as somebody who, although weirdly, I did really well in biology, but I think that had more to do with the fact that I had to memorize a lot of stuff. And back in the day, I was dang good at doing that. But, for somebody like me who, ain't no math whiz, it was great to know, I was in the band and I played a musical instrument, and my friends were doing that, and so you bringing together the idea of the sense of belonging and the purpose and where's my place, and I have something to contribute here too. And if I'm not a math whiz, that doesn't mean that the world should be full of nothing else but math whizzes. I think the DEI space is also the do I belong here space, because if you feel very othered, like there's no place for the artsy kid or the musical kid because we're so busy doing algorithms and whatever, um what do we miss out on, right? Like, I don't want to imagine, and I'm gonna, ask the audience, close your eyes for a sec here and imagine a world without art.
mm,
Like everything's just what are they, it's that brutalist industrial concrete slab kind of looking stuff. We had no art to look at, no music. Let's get rid of all of your music. No more of that.
yeah.
Right?
Can you
No
imagine?
literature. Can you imagine? Can you imagine how sucky your life would be? Like, there goes your entertainment. No movies, no TV, no music, no literature, no nothing. Let's take photography away. Let's take all the paintings away. Oh my God. Like all of a sudden, now I'm trying to track in my head the idea that, that strips a lot of the richness of the world away from us,
Hmm.
right? All you get
Yeah.
is, the hardcore or whatever. It's the engineering and it's this or that. And I feel like in the DEI space in business, you're stripping a lot of the enrichment away when you're running a business that makes somebody feel like I don't belong here. I'm not okay. I'm not seen for who I am and what I bring to the table, even though it's a little different from like there's, like then you get groupthink, then bad decisions get made. You miss the boat on an opportunity that you didn't see because everybody was so busy thinking like a hammer and looking for nails.
Yeah.
Am I connecting the dots right here, Jason?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it's sad is what it is.
Mhm.
And it's sad that we are even having this conversation, that it is a topic of conversation,
The
because
conversation with you, Jason, is never sad, but you know that. But yeah, it is actually kind of sad. I do in that space of once again, like so many things out there, it's kind of awful that we have to keep talking about this. Why isn't this a given? And so, like, what are you thinking? Okay, so people are carving this stuff back for whatever reason. We were saving money, or it just seemed, or it didn't work in the first place because maybe it just didn't quite. To your earlier point, maybe you were kind of more checking boxes, and what you really needed was a bit of a lift to know how to do it better in a way that actually worked instead of making people feel like it was a box checking waste of time. But if we're kind of in that space as leaders where we're sitting here going like, well, either we kind of didn't do much about it or it really didn't work the way that we thought. We jumped on that bandwagon but didn't entirely love the ride. What like from your level of expertise, I mean, you're a guy who's really embedded in a lot of things in a very holistic way in the HR world. What should leaders be doing at this point then? Like what's something that they could be like, how do I reverse course before I go even further down this path of dropping the DEI and hurting my business actually even more? What are some of your suggestions?
I think first thing is you got to take a look at holistically how well are your people.
Mm,
How what's your turnover?
yeah,
Where where
yeah, great measure.
where are your weaknesses as far as how people are showing up?
Mm,
How sick days, that productivity. There's a million. I hate the word KPIs, but there's a million things you can look at and track to
yeah.
see, hey, I've got issues.
Mhm,
I've got some things I got to take care of.
mhm,
And if you boil it all back down to what are you doing to help your people, to listen, to show up, to be a leader that tells people that they care and shows that in their actions, you're walking the talk, then it's going to change.
yeah,
You're going to start moving the needle in a positive way.
yeah.
And it takes time. It
Mhm.
takes
Yeah.
time to do it right. It is not a thing that's for a period of time and then it's done. It is an ongoing, continual process
Mhm,
of development, of listening.
mhm,
So, I have several people in our surroundings, in our groups, and our partners, etc. Lindsay Dowd's one of them
mhm.
that talks about listening tours. Go on a listening tour. You
Listening
know,
tour.
I
I love
love that.
that.
I
I
love that.
love that. And if you're in virtual spaces where, because there was always that, management by walk, the walkthrough management kind of thing. You walk around. So, the listening tour. I love that in that space of like, hey, if you haven't done this before, start with asking. Like I always say, we measure what matters. So think about as a business leader, what are you measuring? What are you measuring
True.
in your business? Like you mentioned P&L earlier, Chasen, and I'm like, you're measuring a bunch of things. You're measuring cost of this and that. You're measuring outputs. You're measuring, income coming in. You're measuring customer satisfaction. Are
Yeah,
you
cost of acquisition. You're looking at all kinds of stuff.
content? Whatever. Are you looking at the measurements from the human side of the house. So I love what you said. Like, let's just go back to that for a sec. Like looking at turnover. Are you having turnover? What's that costing you? Is that, is that an acceptable amount of turnover? I would never tell anybody you should be at 0. That would be weird. But a lot of companies have higher turnover than they even really think. And they never really look at like what might be driving people out the door. So even measuring, why are people leaving? Do we know anything around that? Why do people stick around? Sick days, you mentioned sick days. You can measure that, like do a little survey and ask people. Scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling today? Right? I love the listening tour, be open. You might scare the pants off people initially because they're going to look around and go, "You've never done this before. What kind of weird,
Yeah.
did you hit your
What
head?"
is it? What kind of trick is this? Some
My
Jedi mind trick you got.
And if people are, here's another thing, may I say, and you tell me, but I'm thinking if people's reaction to you starting to do this comes from a place of mistrust,
That says a lot right there.
that says a lot, right? You got work to do, but better to know and have a start point, So I think you're right. Measure these kinds of things. Start asking, start listening. Look around. Have you noticed, like I would think in the DEI space too, are there any patterns on who leaves? Or what kind of people are you losing? Or do they all seem to come from the same place? Like, man, this department really churns them. What's going on in this department versus another department, right?
Yeah, there's so much you can crank out and look at a ton of data. You can be over inundated with data to the point where you don't act because you're scared of what actions to take and how to do it. It is going to be messy.
Yeah.
It's going to be a journey. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. But here's the thing. There's people like yourself that they can hire with Lazarus Learning to do the work and find the solutions. So I think the real thing is, are you asking for help? Are you realizing, and I say this as a kind of tongue in cheek as an addict, the very first step is realizing that you are powerless over your addiction and you need help. And the same thing goes with anything else. Put your ego and the hubris, put your ego, all of that to the side. Be humble and say, you know what? We're going to need help in order to course correct. So let's find the help and let's get the ship going in the right direction. And
I love that you shared that. I think that's super critical. And from the leadership standpoint, the scary, like, oh, I can't be vulnerable. Again, we're back to trust. And I think even in a DEI space, being diverse in the sense of saying, we don't all have the answers, being inclusive and saying it's okay that you don't have the answers. The good news is we will figure out the answers. And as a leader, you get to be part of the solution, which is incredibly exciting. And, I think that's super important. And, recognizing that, hey, everything isn't all, sunshine and punch over here, and that's okay. We're going to, but I know if we start making it more like that, everybody's going to be,
it's going to be a place that you want to work at. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like, why would you not do something in this space? But it is, and the other thing I was thinking too, I love what you said about this is super important. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It's really interesting. Let's go back to science for a sec, those artsy fartsies, right? Did you know, this is crazy as a gal who clearly is not a sporty spice. Did you know that human beings are actually endurance creatures and not short burst sprinters? Did you know that? Did you know we have evolved much better to be long distance runners than sprinters? The Usain Bolts of the world are the anomalies. We're actually built to travel long distances at a slower pace. We're an endurance creature.
Well, that's That makes sense to me. I was in cross country, so yeah. So that was my thing. Just,
Terrible sprinters.
miles and miles. Let's just go miles and miles.
We're terrible.
Not very fast, but miles and miles.
So thinking of that in terms of, I love what you said about this is a journey. Just get it in, nothing really happens overnight in anything in business. You want to get healthier, you want to get more fit, you want to learn to play the violin, whatever you want to do, it's going to take you some time. DEI takes time. And I think that's where, maybe that was the thing that kind of fell off the rails and part of why people are walking away from it, because they didn't quite put the time in, and they didn't quite get the help, as you were saying, that they needed to know what that was to do. So it feels like a fail. And then you kind of want to throw it to the wayside. But in reality, like the world, like the economy is still as diverse as ever. Your customers are still as diverse as ever. Your talent pool is as diverse as it ever was. People still want to feel included and belong. Like that fundamental human need has not gone away because like we changed the calendar.
Yeah.
Right.
If we go on the concept that everyone is in sales in some shape, form, or fashion, then you are literally doing a disservice to your organization because you don't have the market availability and research. Because if you're not really honestly looking for a diverse pool of employees, then you don't have that foreknowledge of, hey, I want to tap in to what's right around me so that I know how to best serve the people that we're trying to, our customers. Yeah. Well, guess what? If everybody looks like you, and you don't even understand what diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, you don't understand any of that, then you're only going to serve a shrinking market. Yeah. And your competitors that are savvy are going to keep taking a chunk and a chunk and a chunk because they're going to figure it out. Yeah. Yeah. And that really makes, to me, that, I mean, it all boils down to, if the only thing you care about is profit, then this is a must. It's a must. Yeah. It's a must for you to develop situations and circumstances where people want to be part.
Right. I mean, just as an example, and I don't know the exact figure off the top of my head, but you just even look at like the billions of available market dollars in the LGBTQ plus community. Mm-hmm. Who want all the same stuff as everybody else who isn't in the LGBTQ, like name anything. You want a wedding, you want a party, you want a birthday, you want a vacation, you want a car, you want a house, you want a pair of shoes. You want all the same stuff, right? Like, you cut that, right? I love what you're saying. You cut that off, you've cut your profitability off. And if your business doesn't kind of really look like your customers or your community or both, who are you serving?
Yeah. I mean, and diversity is more than just race. It is, absolutely, race is a big part of it, but it's race, it's age, it's diversity of thought. Yeah. So there's a ton of ways to create a diverse environment, but it starts with being intentional. Yeah. I love that. Bam, right there. Boy, that's a good one. Being intentional. Really sit down and strategically think, here's where we're at. Here's where we want to be. Here's kind of what worked. Here's kind of what didn't. Where do we want to go? And be intentional about what are you going to do to get there, including, reinstating, if you've already peeled it off, put it back on. It's like a Post-it note. It resticks. Come on, right? But like bring it back into the fold. And this time be intentional and think about, how do we truly make this diversity, equity, and inclusion that we are bringing into the mix? How do we make that our culture? This is how we do things. This is part of our why. This isn't, this becomes our company's DNA.
we do, we are very open, we're very inclusive because we know the world is like this and we are part of that world and we serve that world and we see strength and difference, right? And find all the, as you were kind of touching on earlier, find all the little ways you can insert that in. It doesn't have to be a big grandiose announcement. It could just be like, this is how we're going to change a few things in how we hire people. Or this is how we're going to change a few things in how we interact with each other. Or how you get,
Or how would you like us to change? How
whoa,
about talking to your people and
whoa,
saying, what do you think about X? What are your thoughts on Y? And, how can we do Z?
yeah.
Listening to her. Love it.
Ask questions and then listen. I love that. Oh man, Chason, you and I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours, and we will. We will. I love how we're always threading the needle around this, and again, the fact that you were here, one of my earliest guests from season 1, episode 3. Check it out. That was a really great conversation Chason and I had, as we touched on today. And these things do not happen in a vacuum. So the fact that we had our conversation last time around about the layoffs thing, that didn't go away either. These things are all interconnected. So Chason, thank you so much for coming back on Nuggets with Sauce with me. Love having you. I know you'll be back for more. I know that our audience is going to be back for more too. So thank you very much, everybody, for checking out what we had to share today. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Nuggets with Sauce. I hope we fed your appetite for insights and information on how to improve your business. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never go hungry for more valuable thought leadership.